Hey, I'm so thankful that you are engaging this passion to follow God's call. Maybe that call results in you planning a church. That's why you're on this video today. And I'm sure you're watching this video with many questions, and maybe you have some fears. I remember being in the same place, thinking, do I have the right gift mix to plant a church? Uh, am I doing this for the right motive? Am I doing this just so I can preach more? Or am I doing this because I really want to reach a community for Christ? I remember my wife thinking, is this right for us? Is this the right decision for our family? And then being concerned about, will we have enough support? Not only financial support, but will we be supported by the denomination with coaching, and what resources are available to help us develop and plant the church? Those are all valid questions. And we're going to cover most of those in the video today. So thank you for watching. And I really would encourage you, if after watching this video, you really have that same passion to plant a church, that you would reach out and connect with Church Extension Ministries as you continue to explore this process of church planting with the Bible Fellowship Church.
So Ron, you and I have been involved in church planting for over 30 years.
Yes.
You started a church up in Townsend, Delaware.
Yep.
And I came back from overseas with my wife and one of my children, and got involved in church extension and assisting our church planters in various different areas, demographic studies, research, coming alongside, encouraging guys. But recently, you and I met with our team of church planters, and got from them some of the things that were concerned to them when they came into our organization.
One of my biggest fears that I had to really wrestle with, it was, am I doing this for the right reason? So I'm an associate pastor. I love preaching. I want to preach every week. I know I want to try a new thing. I'm discontent with the church where I'm at, and I just had to keep wrestling, like, am I being prideful, right? We've all heard the horror stories of church planters who are just like, they're doing it for themselves. And I was constantly wrestling with, like, am I just like impatient at the church? Like, I could do good ministry if I was just patient and took my time and gave myself 20 years. And I just kept saying, we're young, we're enthusiastic, we want to reach people with the gospel, like we want to do it now. And so I was constantly wrestling with, is this pride? Is this me wanting to do my own thing? Or is this me wanting to use my gifts and be passionate about it? So I think the fear of, am I doing this, but also was confirmed in some of the gifts that I saw of just, I want to reach people. I want to try new things. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get into those hard to reach places with the gospel and see people come to Christ.
These guys came out of Bible college and seminary, and yet their fear that was expressed that day was, I don't feel qualified. I don't know if I can do this. Another one of those fears that they mentioned was, how do the finances work? Can we pay the bills at the end of the month? I have a core group of 10 people. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
Where do I go and find a building? How do I do that? How do I do those logistics? How do I set up a website? How do I set up Facebook? I'm not technical. How do I do music? A number of those things came out in our meeting, in our conversation. So let me ask this question for you, Ron. When you began, how did you deal with, you and Kathy, I think together, deal with this fear of, are we qualified to plant a church?
Yeah, Ray, it's a big question, maybe one of the most important questions, who really feels qualified? And so in this conversation and with our current crop of church planters, we want to talk about some of the challenges and, of course, some of the blessings as well.
Yeah.
Not all. I want to reemphasize that this conversation is for anyone considering being part of a young, vibrant spiritual community.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You may feel called already to be the church planter. You may be uncertain, or you may be in a career change or retiring, a season of life, or you can come alongside that young, new church and be a help, a blessing. And I think it starts with being called and being qualified. And so we want to take some time today to really talk about that, because it was a big deal for Kathy and I, because who really feels qualified with such a pioneering work of ministry?
I will go further and say that pastors are the same way, and I just did not see myself as a pastor at the time until the people started bringing it up to me. I just had no notion of doing it until it became impossible to ignore. So it's an initial, this is not for me. I'm the wrong guy. That I think if you wanted to encapsulate it, I just felt like the wrong guy. That they didn't know that, but they would soon find out.
I think Brad really speaks for all of us. I mean, sure, I had filled in for the pastor a couple times preaching when he was on vacation. I had business skills. I knew some of them would translate.
I was a carpenter for 20 years before the mission field.
Exactly, right? And yeah, some of it's going to translate. Organizing, planning, building, vision casting, but you never know if all of it's going to translate. And so Kathy and I did, as you and Luis did, what you are doing now, learning, networking, discerning, praying about, is Christ calling us to be a church planter?
Yeah, doing that research and getting answers to those questions is one of the things that we want to be able to do within Church Extension. We recognize that you're going to have questions, and we're going to do our best to answer those questions.
Well, before I got connected with Dave Gundrum, I jumped into probably the smallest church I've ever been to. And it was to see, could I be useful? I knew a small church gave me opportunity to be used really in different areas, and to see, okay, what gifts do I have and how can I engage? So I think a part of it was what helped me make the transition to church planting was being in a small church plant and being asked to do things and doing them well, and also learning new things. Like, oh, okay, this is how this would work if we're starting from scratch. That helped a lot.
Yeah, I love what Josh said, what Josh did, how he spent time getting involved in a small church, learning all the needs and opportunities to love and serve. And I appreciate what Church Extension did within the Bible Fellowship Church. You, Ray, David Gundrum, the director of the ministry, and the entire team, how they came alongside Kathy and I to help us assess and discern our spiritual gifts, to help us understand our calling to go love and serve God and neighbor for the kingdom, for Jesus' kingdom.
Another area that was kind of expressed that day was this financial security. How do we pay the bills at the end of the month? A husband, you guys have 3 boys. The planner is saying, I can't leave this on my wife's shoulders. I can't send her out to work so I can plant a church. How do we work that out? How do we deal with that whole idea of security, financial security, location security? One of the guys mentioned, hey, we were moving away from our babysitters. Maybe some of them were moving away from families, parents, brothers and sisters, moving to a new target area. How do we deal with that? How did you guys do it? You had 2 boys were in college. One was still at home all the time yet, and you surely had some of those challenges. How you and Kathy deal with that?
Well, kids in college is expensive, Ray, but young, strong kids still at home are a big help to church plant. So
moving.
Yes, take advantage of every teenager in your home. I think 2 parts of our story are helpful here. One, I had worked for the same company and the same boss for 30 years. So I had a lot of freedom and flexibility in my job. I was able to carve out a niche in my career that enabled me to stay bivocational, to work really 2 jobs, my job for the last couple decades, along with the church planting ministry. Now, there are pluses and minuses, benefits and drawbacks to every model for ministry and providing for your family. Bivocational ministry was right for Kathy and I.
Yeah, and we don't, certainly within our department, we don't go with, oh, that's the model it has to be. That's a critical element of what we do. Every situation is looked at uniquely.
That's why I think what Los has to say is so helpful to everyone thinking about becoming a church planter.
When you church plant, you're hoping that this church plant can support you at some point. What if it can't? What do I do next? If I leave this job that I was at and I'm good at it and it's paying me good money, then I go to a church plant, and the concern of it not getting to a point of support, what do I do next? What if? I don't like playing that game with my family. What if it's not good for my family? So it was a leap of faith, and it took me 6 months to get myself together, to finally say, thinking worst case scenarios, what's the worst that can happen? It took me a while to get, really, it's a trust issue with the Lord, really,
But predominantly financial is what I'm hearing, or is it more than that?
Yeah, it is financial. My daughter's in college. I got to make sure she's taken care of. Practical reasons. Of moving forward. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of wrestling with God with that, and I can see why someone would say no. I don't have it in me to really trust that. And at the end of the day, it's if you're called, but it doesn't mean that the wrestling of it isn't real either. Some people don't want to wrestle with that season. They're comfortable with full time and what's familiar, but when you have little ones, especially, my daughter, she was the last one out of the house, and she was in college. And what pushed me over was the guarantee, church extension saying, we'll guarantee you 3 years salary. And I was like, okay, that means when my daughter graduates, when she's in school, I'll be able to provide for her still. So if in 3 years this thing doesn't work out, we'll work it out. But my primary concern was my daughter.
For Kathy and I, she needed to know that she's being called too. We're a team, regardless of the roles and titles that people give us within the local church. And so I need to know Christ is calling me, she, her, but then also that the Spirit is calling us together.
Yeah, and that team idea, doesn't mean that, we're looking for wives who can play the piano. That's my wife does, but that's not what every wife does, and it doesn't mean that they're gonna do 10 different things in the church plant. It's being supportive. Mm-hmm. That's really a key element of that team networking.
Those fears were not necessarily my fears, but I know that they were my wife's fears of family, leaving family. All of our family lived in the same town that we had grown up in, that we were still ministering in, and we were leaving that. And we were also leaving all of the friends that we had. Well, I should rephrase that. She was leaving all the friends that she had. I still had all of my pastor friends that I still saw just as much as I always did. So for me, I still had my support network in other church planters, other pastors that I still saw on a regular basis. But my wife did not have friends where we were moving to. She didn't have people to watch the kids, like Josh said. She didn't have family around. And so I know that was a big thing for her. And so for, kind of by extension, it became not a fear for me, but it became something that became something that I had to consider and say, is it worth putting my wife through this?
It's one thing for me to take the step, but it's another thing to how it impacts your wife and your family. And it's difficult because, her argument with me, she says, I'm so stubborn. And I had told her, I said, well, we won't move forward unless you're on board. And she goes, you say that, and I do mean it, but it's not like anyway, she just feels like she doesn't have a choice almost, and that's not true, but at the same rate, she feels it.
We really are a team, husband and wife, one flesh. I said it before, I'll say it again. Irregardless of the titles and roles that people give us or that we take within the local church plant. And so for Kathy and I, we took 18 months, a year and a half, working with Church Extension, you and I working very closely together as we were discerning where's God calling us, and then ultimately saying, yes, now is the time to move.
Thinking about the next thing that we talked about was this whole idea, of going out of post-college, that pioneering spirit. What am I going to do? You get some of these young guys. It's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to dive into this, and yet, maybe they're not. What are they going to do? How do we do that? How do we deal with this whole idea of starting a church plant from scratch? There's myriads of questions that come up.
I think what really pushed me into church planting was a healthy discontentment with normal church. Mm-hmm. God used that internship confirm with me that I would be bored with normal church. Like, I did that internship, got to preach, teach Sunday school, and I was kind of like, oh, is that it? Like, I was on the evangelism committee there, always pushing us to go beyond the walls of the church. And I said healthy discontentment because I felt like that's not where the church wanted to go, and I didn't create any problems, but it's where I wanted to go.
I want to reemphasize what Tim said, where he talked about a healthy discontent, both healthy, we have to be healthy, and a discontent with kind of church as normal. Because as you said, Ray, and I agree, it's a pioneering work. It's a brand new work in terms of casting vision, organizing teams, building a culture. And at times it can be very hard to take an existing culture and reshape it. It's easier to build culture from a blank slate. Doesn't mean that church plants don't have challenges. It doesn't mean that church plants don't need teams, but you have to improvise at times.
Yeah, we see that with a number of churches. We've got one in Center City, Lancaster. You can't take that church plant and plant it where you live down in Townsend. It would not work. So we don't come and say, this is the model you must use as a church planter.
And you've got to work together with brothers and sisters in Christ, and you have to trust the Holy Spirit, because at the end of the day, it is the Spirit of the living God who plants churches.
Absolutely.
Now, church planters and church plants are, in fact, kind of the missionary movement in North America, because the church is so well established here. And so being part of that young, small church plant, or being the church planter or part of a church planting team, is to really challenge the church to be the church in a community, in a culture, in a place, a community that desperately needs the love of Jesus.
Yeah. In that community, that community mindset, our one church plant is in Center City, Allentown. And one of the elements of people that they reach out to is a large segment of homeless people. And that church plant, and that church, now a church, is going to look different than our one in Chestertown, Maryland. They have a high-end, high-influence people. You certainly have to build a church plant that's going to minister to those individuals as well.
My heart was for the lost and evangelism. I think every church, even established churches, need to have that heart or you're not growing. But my heart was like, okay, church planting gives me the opportunity to get out on the streets, to be with people, like not just stuck in an office. As much as I love preaching, it's not my primary gift. My gift is in heart is in evangelism, like just sharing the gospel with the lost, and that's what church planting is about. And so that's the main driving force for me, was just like, I just want to be out there preaching the gospel to the lost. And I was in an office and I was happy and content to preach and to do youth ministry and stuff like that. But my heart was like, I didn't feel like I could afford myself to be out in the community. I could have, but you know what I mean? Like, church planting for me just felt like, okay, this is like grassroots, ground up stuff. We got to be out there preaching the gospel. So
I love what James said. In fact, it reminds me of a professor I had in seminary who said, great preaching is the word of God poured out through the life of the preacher. And so a call to be a church planter includes a pulpit ministry, but it is not automatically or exclusively a pulpit ministry. And he needs to be surrounded by a healthy team, as we've said. And so I could take that quote from seminary and change it, that great evangelism is the word of God poured out through the life of the evangelist. And so church planters, church planting teams, they have a heart for their communities to go and love neighbor in service to the King.
Yeah. And when we think about that team, we surround that church planter not only with that core group, but leadership team. We call it a transitional leadership team, so that those are men who are either pastors or elders in other churches near them, and to give them advice, to draw from some of these guys got 30 years of experience. When you got a guy that's new to church planting, new to pastorate, how do you deal with these situations? Well, we want to surround them with those experiences as well.
I had a couple fears related to the BFC itself. I've reached out to them twice over the years.
Yeah.
Before the third time was a charm.
Chicken.
One of them was urban. Was going in an urban area, and I was concerned about BFC's ability to do urban, because the urban BFC churches I had searched out were failing, and this was before Los had even started up in Lancaster. So I had a fear of that, whether the BFC could truly support urban church. And the second thing would be kind of related to what people are saying about creative pioneering, is I went into church planning instead of the existing church pastor, because church planning, day one, you implement your philosophy, and people kind of wrap around that. You go into an existing church and it takes, 2 to 4 years before your philosophy is enacted. Good luck. For revitalization.
We've modified that time.
So the question was, I knew the doctrine, I was okay with the doctrine, but I was wondering if getting into the BFC, if there's then a certain philosophy that follows, and this is the way you must do church life. It turned out to be unfounded with the autonomy of the local churches, but I didn't know that in looking into it from the outside. So it was a fear.
You heard Rick's heart. Rick's heart is for the city. And maybe your heart is for more rural environments. Maybe it's for the poor and disenfranchised communities. Maybe it's for your local school district. Regardless of where your heart is, to be a church planter or part of a church plant is to have the heart of a missionary. People who will engage the culture for Jesus.
But I think, one of the things that we think about, if you were going to go out and buy a new car, you're going to go to the dealership, you might browse the selection out there. I know it's not as much right now, but you get out there and you look at the cars. You might even talk to the salesman and say, well, what can you give me for mine? What's the price you're talking about? But you might want to go down the street and look at that car lot and decide. And then you might go home and say, is this the right time? Is this the right car? Is this the right deal? You come a long way with questions and all of that. And I think, it's important for people in our church planting culture here. We don't expect you to give us a phone call or drop us an email with the assumption that, hey, you're already committed. We've got you. No, we understand this exploring process, and we want to be there to help navigate you through these challenges, get some of these questions answered. Like you said, sometimes it's learning from your failures, but when you fail, we use that word as a bad word, fail. We learn from that, and we all learn that. Dave Gundrum, myself, we learn from failures that have happened in other church plants, so that how we can help new church planters to maybe avoid those, to deal better with them, to find better solutions for those situations, to surround them with better equipment or better facilities or better, answers up front. Yeah. So that idea of coming on board and researching is a key element of what we look for here at Church Extension.
So, what should you do now? You should reach out to Ray or myself. We're here to help. Or reach out to David Gundrum, who's the director of Church Extension Ministries, and we'll answer every question you have openly and honestly. If church planting, being the church planters on your heart, then by all means, reach out to David today. That's all David does, is assess and prepare church planters, plan and launch new churches. Maybe you've heard what we've said and you know you want to be a church planter. You're called to that ministry, but maybe not. Maybe you still have questions, or maybe you just want to be part of a young, small, vibrant community on the front lines of engaging the culture and telling people about Jesus. Like the way Aquila and Priscilla came alongside Paul in the book of Acts. Well, there's a role for you in that ministry as well, Ray. Yeah. We know lots of people. Yeah. We're sitting in a church right now where people have come alongside the church planter and helped over and over and over again. A blessing to this church, a blessing to this community. So reach out to you or I, as we've said, or David Gundrum, and we'll help connect you to that young, small, vibrant spiritual community. It's a place that's alive. It's a place where discipleship is happening.
The more and more this looked like it could actually happen. I'd never entertained the notion. Then it started to look like, okay, my feet aren't touching the ground. I'm being somehow carried to Cape May. She's coming along. And I remember driving to Exeter. We were at the Exeter Satellite, and we were driving there, and I just went, are you okay with if this happens? That we actually, and I was so sheepish about it, and all of a sudden she just goes, "Oh, we're going." And that's all she said. And I said, "Oh, okay." So I had that buy-in. So that was a huge advantage. And that really was the day I said, "Oh, let's go." And then it was full speed ahead. So yeah, the obstacles are real, but once they're overcome, then I think it's easy to say, focus.
So, you have questions, and they're good questions. Yeah. Reach out to us today.